behind you.
Oh, it's always fun over here at the Coalition co-working space. Hi, everybody online. Welcome to the Hive Chicago Hive Fund Round 2, 2015 Round 2 RFP webinar. We're here today. My name is Robert Friedman. I'm the portfolio strategist for Hive Chicago. And I'm joined today by Maria Hibbs and Sana Jafri, who I'll introduce in just a second, bring them up on the screen. And we're here today to help Hive members in our network to learn more about the unique opportunity provided by the Chicago Community Trust to members of the Hive Chicago Learning Network to bring some of their project ideas to fruition through a fund for connected learning that provides various levels of support to the membership, ranging for small grants at around $10,000 to large grants at $200,000 for projects with up to a $600,000 budget. So really an opportunity to scale projects. We're going to talk a little bit about the fund, and we're going to go through the actual application process. So if you are joining us, and you want your other members of your organization to see some of the information that we share today, specifically around completing the application online, feel free to share this broadly. We'll be recording this live right now on air, and it'll be shared on YouTube after today, which you can access at any time. I also wanted to point out the Q&A feature, which is really nice in Google Hangouts. If you go to our Hangout page, if you go to the Hive Chicago G+ page and visit this Hangout event specifically, you'll be able to add questions using the Q&A feature. You can add questions to our queue. Those will appear in a list that we can see, and when it's time to answer your questions, as we go through them and complete those questions, we'll actually timestamp when that happened. So later, anyone can revisit your question and see our answer. So feel free to use that Q&A feature on G+ to add questions as we go through here. And without further ado, I wanted to introduce Maria Hibbs and Sana Jafri from the Chicago Community Trust Hive Fund for Connected Learning. Take it away, ladies.
Thanks, Robert. It's great to see you today, and welcome to the 2015 Round 2 webinar. We're thrilled to have you, all of you who are listening and watching now, and those of you who will be consulting this broadcast later as you're developing your applications for funding. I just wanted to start by saying, by thanking you for joining us today, and also just a little thing. The trust is redoing, it's launching a new brand, and both Sana and I are wearing these little buttons today that say, "What you do matters." And so we could talk about that in a lot of ways, and we can emphasize different words like what you do matters, what you do matters, what you do matters, and all of the above is true in the work that you do for the kids in Chicago. So I'm going to hand the program over to Sana, who will take us through the agenda, and every once in a while I might pipe in, but for the most part this will be her show. Take it away.
Thank you, Robert and Maria. I just want to echo Maria's sentiment, and thank you all for being here. And we're excited to see what you guys have in store, and hopefully we can help one another in this process. And be patient with us. We're still working through kinks with Grant Central, so we apologize in advance. But we look forward to hearing more about your applications. But before we do that, we'll get into the application and the agenda. So I'm going to do a screen share shortly. And our apologies, we had a few technical issues. Sorry, let's start. In terms of the way that the format is seen. So first off, we did the welcome, and now we're going to go into the application a little ahead of the schedule, which is great because we have a lot to cover. And then we're going to open the session for Q&A, which you can do in the G+ section that Robert mentioned, and also for any questions that we had in advance.
Hey, Sana, I just wanted to alert you to the fact that the current slide that we can see is the budget slide.
Yep.
Okay, and that's where you're starting?
Yep, that's where we're starting.
That's where we're starting. So it's the tricky one. It's at the end of the application, even though we're starting at the beginning. It's usually at the end. So you'll see in the tabs there's project description, detailed questions, participant profile, and project budget. And the reason we're starting here is because it's if you're short on time, this is probably one of the key things that we've seen in the past that's had people have had confusion about. So we'll go through it quickly, but if you have any questions, please again mention them. And if I'm going too fast, just mention that in the comment section. So for example, if you are requesting a $50,000 grant from the Hive, your requested amount, say you and 4 other partners are requesting $50,000. You're going to say, the first line, you're going to write the amount that you were requesting for your grant, which is $10,000. Correct, Maria?
That's right.
Okay. The next line you're going to have, there's a little plus feature in Grant Central. You're going to do an add drop for the line, and you're going to add Hive other partners, so whoever else is asking for funding. We do recommend that, or we do prefer that each organization apply in their own application, so we can send the check directly to them. It's easier in terms of accounting. We also think it's great for the organization, so we do prefer that rather than sub-granting, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But so if I'm applying for a $50,000 grant to the Hive, I would say I want my portion of that $50,000 is $10,000 hypothetically. So I'm going to put $10,000 in the requested amount, which you'll see here. And then in the next line, you're going to put the total requested amount of all your other partners. So in this case, it's $40,000. This grant is actually a Catalyst grant. So the total for the Catalyst grants, you need a match, a 1-to-1 match, correct? So your actual amount is $50,000 you're requesting from the grant, from the Hive, but you also have to be able to match that with another organization, whether it's a foundation or individual support. So
Hi, Sana.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you there. I just wanted to give you a heads up that you had intended to minimize that sort of menu section to maximize the screen view. And because the slides do appear small, if you want to highlight any particular section, it's possible to zoom in to make the slides bigger as you're speaking, if you need that to illustrate. So I just wanted to give you a heads up and let you know about.
Yeah, I can't see my.
Looks much better now. Excellent.
Okay. Great. My apologies. Thank you. Okay, so just to rewind a little bit, so $10,000 is what I'm requesting for myself, for my organization from the Hive, although with the whole project that we're looking for has a $100,000 price tag. It's a Catalyst. And with a Catalyst, if you look at the grant requirements, which you can find on the Hive Network's website, RF 2015 round 2, you'll see that for Catalyst you need a 1-to-1 match. So again, the match in terms of funding doesn't have to be a foundation. It can be any kind of support, and it doesn't have to be new support. It can be past support that you've already raised in some way. It could be individual support or whatever. You just have to outline what that is, and that would be $50,000. Say it is McCormick Foundation and they've agreed to give you the $50,000. Then you would fill that out in the committed section, which is in the section right here. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for just a second and see if there's any questions. Robert, are there any questions?
Not yet. We still haven't gotten any questions, so I'm going to take this as a moment to remind people who are watching that if you have questions about anything, including things Sana has just said, you can visit our Google Plus page, Hive Chicago's Google Plus page, and you can use the Q&A feature for this webinar to add questions to our queue. If you add questions, then we will answer them in the order that we receive them, and it'll timestamp the video later so you can go back and hear our answers again. So make sure to use that Q&A feature.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. Okay, so moving on. So that's your revenue requested that you're hoping to get from the Hive through this application, and then through the fund, the Hive fund. And the next section is the expenses. So these are kind of going to be mirror images. So the total revenue of the amount should equal the total expenses of the amount. So, for example, you can request money for wages and benefits, and we recommend that. We don't shy away. You know, obviously, programs aren't run by robots; they're run by people. So we need to pay people to, you know, do the work. There is one that the indirect cost. What is the percentage that needs to be?
Up to 10%.
Up to 10%. Great. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's the 10% you're requesting from the Hive fund, not from
the total grant.
The total grant. So, or the total project. Yes. So this column, I'm not going to go through each number, but this column would be, you know, depending on what you have. You know, this is a good example. You should also be filling this column out, right? Too, which is what. Oh no, that's yeah. So this is what you're requesting from the fund, and then this is what we'll look at. Go ahead.
It's important to note that all partners will fill in the expense column, the expense rows the same. So it will be identical. The expenses will be identical for all of you when you're submitting. It's the revenue that will be.
Great. Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
I think we Okay. Moving on to the next slide.
One other thing about the budget page is that in the application there's a budget narrative. And the budget narrative is that place where you can explain a lot of things that you may have. So even if you have doubts about some of the items, how to display them in the application, you can clarify using the narrative section. So
great point. Yeah, really try to. I mean, I know there is a character count limit in terms of the budget narrative, but that's your opportunity to explain what, you know, what your indirect costs are, what do you mean by contract services or professional fees? What are you using those funds for? What are you going to be potentially, you know, what's the salary breakdown? I mean, you don't have to go into everything, but because there is a limitation, but it would be really, it'll make your proposal and application stronger if you really flesh some of those details out in the budget narrative, and give the review committee a better understanding of what you're requesting. Okay, so we're going to get into new application questions, which are new to this round specifically. So if you applied in the last round, these are, again, new questions. Okay. Okay, great.
Sorry about that, Sana. You were interrupted briefly. I have muted that participant, but if you'd like to maybe back up just a moment.
Okay, great. So we're going to go into new application questions again now, and this is new to this round specifically, so 2015 round 2. Even if you applied last round, these questions are tweaked a little or new in some sense. So I'm not going to go through every grant category just for time. But we are going to go through the example I'm going to use as a Spark, just because usually it's the most that we get. I don't know about this round, but so I'm not going to go through exactly all the questions, but for example, this question refers to working in the open. So the expected outputs of your project, and each question level, so the catalyst level, lever level, link level, glimmer level, the questions are different for each level, so pay attention to that also. But again, I'm only going to go through the Spark just for time's sake today. So please describe how you develop a fully tested project and the lessons you hope to learn through this experimentation. Please describe how you develop a plan for continued evolution to a catalyst, and please describe how you openly share and document results and lessons learned with the network. So I'm going to kind of highlight the last one the most because this is the newest one. So how you openly and share and document. So if you've been part of the Hive Chicago Learning Network, you've probably heard the phrase working in the open. Or maybe you haven't, but it's a mantra that Mozilla uses and something that we've also adopted in some capacity. So what that means is that, you know, the work that you do can be openly networked. Sorry. So it could be accessible to anyone. It also shows the process rather than just the end result. So please describe how you openly share and document results and lessons learned within the network. So this is your process of how you plan to do some of those things. So for example, it might be a blog that you're going to write, or a different what's the right word? Like a folder, a Google folder, or whatever different mechanisms or tools you're going to use to openly share your work and document it. Robert, I'll kick it back to you also. If you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think two things that I think would be valuable for people to recognize in this section of the application, which are sort of the output section of the application. So this is where we're really trying to get at the specific artifacts that are generated, or the pieces of work that are created through the process. And so when Sana mentions a fully tested project, that actual project is an output, right, that you created and experimented and developed with. When we talk about a plan for continued development to the catalyst level, that these things could be presented in many different ways, but the output is a plan to scale up this work. So we want to, the fund wants to know how you're going to go about developing that plan. What are the strategies you're going to employ to develop that output? And likewise, with the openly shared and documented results, Sana named blog posts or Google Drive as strategies for producing that openly shared output. But there are many strategies for sharing, including attending meetups, hosting deep Hive dives, going to conferences, creating working groups, participating in moonshot groups. We can think of many examples, and in fact, Hive network staff are a great resource to tap into some of those channels, since we're operating the website and coordinating some of those meetups. So think of us as a channel for distribution.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you, Robert, for adding those. Those are actually these are just a few of the many examples that are out there. It's not the answer, it's just an example. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question. I'm going to zoom in a little, Robert, if that's okay. Tell me if it's too much or not good.
Now zooming in is fine.
Is this good? Okay. So this question is actually in response to the survey. So the people that filled out to the survey about the last round, we heard you, hopefully, and have addressed some of your concerns. And so this first question, what are you proposing to do in this project and how do you plan to do it, is really kind of a elaboration of that first sentence that you get, or two sentences that you get in the application, that's actually standard to the trust. So that's not something that we can change in terms of the character count, but the workaround that we did was to add this question. So that two-sentence kind of summary that is great about what your project is. This is an opportunity to elaborate on this. So what are you proposing to do? Clearly and concisely, and how do you plan to do it?
And we'd ask that you be, as clear as possible. It's like, imagine that you're telling your mom about this project, and so that an individual who doesn't have a clue about what you're planning to do will have a really clear sense of what you're planning to do and what some of your goals are.
Great, and it's got a 3,000 character limit, so hopefully that's good.
But we do value brevity.
We do value brevity, and yeah. So just keep that in mind. Robert, did you have anything to add? Okay.
Sorry for my delay. No, I've been muting myself just so I don't interrupt or create any background noise. So sometimes I'm a little slow to respond. But I think that's pretty clear. I think this overview section is something people were asking for, and it's super helpful. So thanks for adding it.
Yep. Thank you. And then the second question is kind of like, okay, so you have this great idea, and you're going to try to reach youth in Chicago, or you're going to try to reach educators in Chicago. How do you plan to recruit those program participants? What's your outreach strategy? Kind of around that. So describe your strategy for recruiting program participants or reaching your audience with information related to project activities and outcomes. So I think that's pretty straightforward. But again, it's a new question that we've added, and we've we asked it a few times in the site visits, and this is an opportunity for you to tell us in words as well. Okay.
So while you transition to the next slide, I just wanted to remind everybody watching today that there is a Q&A feature on the actual webinar page, on the Google Hangout page. So if you visit the event for today's webinar, there's an opportunity. You'll look for the little Q&A logo on the video screen to add your questions to our queue. If you've joined us live, I see we have a number of people who have joined us live on air. At some point, we're going to transition into the Q&A section, and so that's going to be an opportunity for you guys to verbalize anything on air if we don't have any questions in the queue. So try to use both of those features. I'm just going to keep reminding us that those are available. Thank you. Go ahead, Son. I'm sorry.
No, great. Thank you. So again, this is project progression. So if you've been in the application, which we hope you have, you've seen this question. So this is what we like to call, and I think Robert came up with this term, but breadcrumbs. Please describe your project's origin and inspiration. Why is this new idea unique or distinguished from other ideas? And we want you to provide actual references. So for example, working in the open, some of the documents that you plan to create for this project, what have you done in the past that kind of highlights this work that is kind of leading up? Or maybe it's not what you have done, but what others have done, and you're remixing it in some way. So you could provide the URLs, the bit.lys, other documents to kind of show, and that's something that the review committee can look at and review to see what blog posts have been on the topic or the project, websites, artifacts, other artifacts. So it's actual again, artifacts that we're referencing in this.
And the beauty of this is that, as you know, we have these word limits. And so if you were to try to describe where the previous work is coming from and what you're building off of, you would probably need to use a lot of words to do that, a lot of characters. So by using links and references, we're able to actually see what you're referring to, and you're not using up all your characters.
Yeah, and it maybe your idea is spawned from a meetup or something like that, and you don't have a hard explicit reference, but there is probably something that you could do some research and figure out how your project kind of fits into that. Maybe well, I'm not going to give away examples, but that's just an idea there. The next question is, it's been there in the past, but we've just refined it again. So please select one and only one Hive Moonshot Challenge area. And the reason we've done that is that, we really feel that the moonshots you're working towards one action item, and we want you to address that. So in the drop-down menu, this is a screenshot, so the drop-down menu is not going to be there, but it'll have all the different moonshots, and you should select one and explain why the project is a seed solution or an exemplary solution to that. And
one of the reasons for not having you focus on 3 or 5 or all the moonshots is that really, and some people might have interpreted in the past the question to mean that we expect you to address all of the moonshots. And if groups tried to do that in every project, it would really dilute the effectiveness of your project. So the point is to highlight one and focus on doing that work well.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I think that was a really nice clarification. I think that rather than a laundry list, I think, as you've described, focusing on how you might be effective in addressing one of these challenge areas is the right approach here. You could say a lot more by saying less to some extent, and I just wanted to sort of note quickly that there's kind of 2 approaches to responding here when it comes to moonshots. If it's okay for me to add, just that you might be in your proposal, in your project, bringing a new solution to a persistent challenge that we're all facing in the moonshot challenge areas, right? So you might be doing something totally new, but you might also be adopting best practices from your Hive member peer organizations, either seed solutions or other exemplary solutions that our peers have generated in the network. Some of those are articulated on the Moonshot pages. So if you go to hivechicago.org/moonshots, just that simple, you can find the list of our moonshot areas. You can dig into those to see what information people have already generated about these challenge areas that you can use in your proposals. So again, it's about bringing something new or activating or testing something other people have thought of.
And Robert, maybe just for the newbies, do you want to explain what a seed and exemplary solution is? Do we have time for that?
Sure. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, and ultimately sometimes these are terms that we're using kind of as buzzwords, but ultimately we're talking about seed solutions as ideas that people may have proposed during conversations at Moonshot tables over the last year or at Hive Chicago Buzz that no one's really tried yet. That might be an interesting strategy to employ in your project. Whereas like an exemplary solution might be something that's already become an tested or implemented idea to address some of these challenge areas. So exemplary solutions are the projects that we're already doing or have done in the past that have been effective in addressing some of these challenges.
Great, thank you so much. Okay.
You're welcome.
On to the next. So the rest of this is pretty, we're going to fly through quickly, but for the next 2 slides at least. But these are just questions that, especially if you've done the Smart Grid Challenge or you're applying for the Smart Grid Challenge, you should definitely pay attention right here. But and primary audience served. So this is again a drop-down menu. So this is a screenshot, so you're not going to see the drop-down menu, but you have seen that there's different options that you'll see. Teens, educators is your could be your primary audience, and say you're doing the Smart Grid Challenge. Your secondary audience served from the project would be adults.
Yeah, it could be adults.
Yeah, it could be adults. So who is the secondary audience that might be also being served by this project? So that's just a new kind of feature again, or new question in this application. And then we really want to be, and we're going to stress this, the number to be directly served and indirectly served. We don't want you to inflate these, and we want you to be really try to be as close to accurate as possible, because we're going to be pulling this data again and try to tell the story of the Hive Learning Network and the Hive Chicago Fund and all of your work, and to kind of promote connected learning. So it's really important to get close and accurate data. So, numbers to be served indirectly, don't list your whole listserv, like 20,000 or something. List, the people that maybe are actually indirectly served.
So, Sana, maybe say a few words about what we mean by directly served.
Great. So directly serves are the participants or the people that are actually being impacted by the program. So it could be, say, if you're doing a Spark, the minimum requirement is at least 25 youth being served or educators being served through that program.
So those would be the people you're working with directly, maybe face-to-face, you're having a lot of interaction with. And then the indirectly served are those who may, if the project involves building a website around a particular topic, it would be all of those you'd expect to serve indirectly through their access to that website. Something that's important to note is that these directly and indirectly served numbers here and then in the outcomes that you expect to achieve will be things that we're going to expect you to report on at the end of your project. So it does behoove you to think carefully about how many people you're planning to serve directly and indirectly, and as Sana said, not inflate them, because then when you report, it's really better for you to accurately reflect and have greater alignment between what you said you were going to do and what you actually accomplished through the grant.
Great. Okay, on to the next one. So again, this is a drop-down menu, but so this is a feature that was there in the past. We just tweaked it again. So you're going to add and edit your partner. So in order to apply for funding, you need to know that you need to have, a partner, a Hive member partner. So in this option, I'm sorry again that the options are not there, but you're going to add your partner. So say I'm the Hive Chicago Learning Network, and I'm partnering with the Art Institute, just hypothetically. Obviously the Hive is not, the network doesn't apply for grants, but for this example, we're going to use that. So we would put the Art Institute as our partner, and then they're also going to be requesting funding. So of my $50,000 project, they're going to be requesting, $20,000. So that's the requested amount, and the funding type would be funded. Suggested payment date would be whatever your project, when your program starts, and then their roles and responsibility. One thing that we've added within this is a subgranted feature. So before there was funded and unfunded, and we got a lot of confusion on this, and it's our apologies for not clarifying. So we hope this opportunity kind of clarifies this. But funding type, so if the Art Institute was really not getting any money, they were getting $0, they would be an unfunded partner. So that would be under funding type. Say the Art Institute is actually getting money, but they're going to be just channeling that through the Hive Learning Network. That would be sub-granted in terms of your funding type. We don't really prefer that channel, but it is an option depending on what your project is and what the circumstances are. So again, the differences between the funding type are funded. You're actually requesting money. You're getting a check
from the trust.
From the trust, great. Unfunded, it means you're getting no money. You're getting $0 from the trust or anyone else. And subgranted means that you're getting money, but you're not getting money directly from the trust. You're getting it through the lead partner or the lead organization on the applicant. Any questions on that, or? Okay. And then the letters of agreement, just to note, every applicant needs to have a letter of agreement. So even the lead organization needs to submit a letter of agreement. If you need an example of a letter of agreement, please reach out to us, or you can Google it. There's many examples out there. It just kind of tells you about what your commitment is to the project, and usually the highest ranking official within the organization would sign off saying that they're committed to do the work. Okay, and the last section is the project time frame and the program time frame. Last time we just had the project time frame, so again, this is just a drop-down menu, your start date and your complete date for your project versus your program. So maybe your project is really a year, but the program is just 6 months.
So the project would include your planning time. Your project duration would include the closeout and the time that it would take for you to compile your final report. The program time is when services or activities are actually being delivered to your target audience.
Great. Okay, so do we have any questions, Robert? I'll stop there for a few minutes and then see if we want to go into Q&A, and then we can get into this outcomes and measures things if people do not have questions.
I think we should push through to your last section on outcomes and measures. We haven't received any Q&A questions. I saw one from Jeff Sweeten in the comments to the video, so we technically have one question. But I think we can briefly review this last set of slides. Or are there many more? Sana, do you want to? What's your?
A few more. I mean, this section is more robust in terms of outcomes and measures, which we value, but we want to have this opportunity to address any questions that you guys have. That's more of the point of it. So.
Okay. Well, so why don't we then, like you suggest, well, let's take a break. We have a lot of people who have joined us live on air. You're all currently muted. I muted you, so just to prevent stray noise, background noise from the transmission. If you, Jeff, Jackie, I see you, Julie, Valerie, have any questions, why don't we let you unmute yourselves and ask away. And if you're unable to unmute yourself, I can unmute you. One way you can signal to me that you have a question is in the comments portion of the Hangout. So if you go to the left-hand side menu of options, there's a little blue chat box. And in the chat, you can ask me to unmute you if that's an issue. I believe you should be able to unmute yourselves, though. So we'll just do a brief pause to give people a chance to chime up. If there's really any questions at all, now's the time. All right. In that case, Sana, I think since nobody's got any immediate questions to ask, why don't we continue with the rest of your slides, and then we can always come back to folks to see if anything comes up towards the end. In the meantime, you can use the chat feature, the Google Plus page, the Q&A feature to source questions.
Great. Robert, can you see the slide deck?
Yes, I can. You're good to go.
Okay, great. So we're going to go through, this is quite detailed, but the point of it was to be a resource for applicants to come back to later. We're not going to go through everything, but it's an opportunity to kind of get more information rather than too little. But this is really about outcomes and measures. So which is at the end of the application, you're going to list your outcomes and measures, but it's really changing kind of the frame of mind with what your project is. How does your project think about it from the beginning? Before you draft your idea, what are you going to try to change? What is it that you're trying to change in the lives of your individuals or your families or your organization? And that's kind of, as a result, would be your outcome. The measure is saying, like, how are you going to track that information? How are you going to be really see if that outcome is achieved, and that's your measure. So those are kind of the different the words that we've using. And goal is kind of the bigger ultimate goal of what your program is, or maybe your organizational mission and things like that. And just some note I'm going to say is that outcomes and measures kind of answer the question, so what? So what? You did this great project. What's the point of it? What are you trying to do in terms of changing results? And I apologize if this is rudimentary, but we just wanted to kind of highlight some of it.
And so we will want to know what the difference is, what the experience or the outcome is for the people you're serving directly, but we'll also want to know in terms of outcomes, so what does this contribute to connected learning? What does this contribute to the field? What are we going to be learning as a result of this particular project?
Yeah, that's a great point. So these are kind of some of the questions you can ask yourself in terms of when you're drafting your outcomes. So what has changed in the lives of youth educators or your organization as a result of this project? What's going to happen as a result? Has the project actually made a difference? That's something that you're going to maybe do at the end, but you should think about it from the beginning when you're drafting your concept. Is this program, are you testing an idea? Are you experimenting? These are some of the principles around design thinking that the Hive Chicago Learning Network and the Hive Fund believe in, and we want you to kind of think about your project in that way. Is your project an intervention for is your project an intervention in some way? And how are the lives of program participants better as a result? Or it could be, as Maria said, not just the program participants, it could be the network or something else is your indirect kind of outcome. Any questions? Talking too fast? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So one of the ways that you can draft stronger outcomes and measures is thinking about SMART. I know that most people are probably cringing inside SMART. Why do we have to use this darn thing, this acronym? But if you haven't heard of it, I'm sure you probably have, but just as a refresher, there's some variations of what the words can be defined as, but generally speaking, it's S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A is assignable, so who's going to be doing the task. There's some variations in that. Some people say, A could stand for aggressive or achievable or whatever. But for this purpose, we're going to use assignable because, especially with different partners, that's really important. Is your goal or project actually reachable, feasible? So that's something to incorporate too. What's the time limit that you're going to do this project? And the question mark that we add, which is part of it, SMART, as measured by what? How are you going to measure all these different outcomes? Okay. So we're going to go through an example right now. So the original outcome, for example, could be participants will improve their digital literacy skills. Pretty standard outcome, would you agree, Maria?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're going to take this outcome and think about different questions that we can draft as a result. So questions to ask yourself. And there's, at the end of the slides, there's some resources as to where this information is from. So if you want to look at it more in depth, you can access those resources as well. It's in the slide deck. So so keep in mind your time frame. So time limited, the T. By what date and within what time period are you hoping to do this project? Is it after 6 months that the intervention will, have a change or, not have a change? Is it a year? That's something that you can incorporate in your outcome. If you're thinking of this as an intervention, which you hope you are, is what is the work or service you're applying to create the intended change? So what is it that you're actually doing to have participants improve their digital literacy skills? So what is it that's happening? Is it mentoring that's happening? Is it storytelling? Is it professional development? Is it one-on-one tutoring? What is it, the service or work you're providing as a result? Other questions you can ask yourself are what portions of what target group? So who is being targeted by this? And I gave just multiple examples, but these are just small examples. There's many answers to this. But is it 75% of youth, 80% of educators? What is your target group that you're hoping to achieve through these outcomes? And directions of change, which is something that Robert and I have talked quite a bit about, is that oftentimes applicants feel like that they have to say that they're going to be increasing their direction of change. And that's not necessarily true, and Maria, you can chime in if you disagree, but it could be decreasing or it could be maintaining. That's the change that you're trying to implement, but incorporating those types of words would be helpful. Okay, and then the next two are degree of impact. So by what percentage of the direction of change is going to be, by what percentage is that degree of impact going to happen? Is it going to be a 50% increase? Is it going to be a 50% decrease? Is it going to be maintaining, 50% of those participants? So things to keep in mind. And then lastly, areas of impact. So what is going up or down or getting larger or smaller, which is connected to the intervention in some way. So what is it that you're trying to change? Is it digital literacy skills? Is it reading skills? Is it design skills? Is it interpersonal skills? I mean, I use skills as the example in this, but it could be whatever you're doing in terms of your area of impact.
I think something that's interesting, a question that you may have in the direction of change when it comes to maintaining something. What would that mean? And as projects scale, as projects grow, there will be, so let's say someone has applied for a Catalyst grant or a Lever grant. At that point, we're going to be looking for sustainability. So in that particular case, it would be, so how is your institution going to maintain this wonderful project that you're scaling? How is it going to be continued? So that is a good example of maintenance. How is it going to continue and to grow without our support eventually?
Yes, awesome point.
Yeah, and I think there's even an example of maintenance which is really relevant to specific program activities are sometimes when you make significant changes to a program or when you add depth or content or additional time on task, etc., you can get a fall off, and it's actually meaningful to say that there's been no loss in participation So we've been able to maintain the same level of enthusiasm or participation in our programs while at the same time increasing the level of rigor or the duration of the intervention or the expected outcomes. So I think sometimes we want to keep expanding, but if you've already got 100% attendance and you're filling every chair, it may not be reasonable to increase the number of students in the program.
Right.
Definitely. I'm going to +1 that, Robert. Thank you. Okay. On to the next. So this is outcomes and measures. So questions that you can keep in mind also in terms of SMART. So there's an outcome section within the application, then there's also measures. So again, measures is how are you tracking or measuring, I guess, what your outcomes are. So think about, what is it measured by what indicator? So is it responses? Is it scores? Is it feedback? What's your what tool are you using, I guess, in some way? And then the next one is actually which instrument. So are you going to be how are you getting those indicators? Are they through surveys? Are they through interviews? Are they through focus groups? What is the instrument that you're using to get to gather or to test the outcome and track them and measure it? And then administered when. So are you going to do it at the beginning of the project and then also at the end? Things to incorporate in terms of your measurements. Okay. And then, so this is our example. So hypothetically, again, participants will improve their digital literacy skills. So in the original, that was our original outcome. Now this is a revised SMART outcome. It might be.
And that might be the big goal.
Yeah.
That's your big goal.
Great.
So then the SMART outcome.
Yeah, so how can we tease that out a little bit? And and this is a teased outcome. And again, we know that there's a character limitation, but less is more in some sense. Sometimes maybe you don't need 6 outcomes. Maybe you just need 2 or 3, and then this could be your measure and outcome. So after 6 months of peer-to-peer instruction, 75% of youth participants served by this project will improve their interest and proficiency in Photoshop as measured by survey results at the beginning and end of a 6-month period. So you could put in the outcome section could be the top before the comma, and then the section after that could be the measurement section. If you guys have questions. I'm going to pause there just to see if there's any feedback or comments or questions on this, because it's something that is important, and I just want to take a moment. Robert, anything?
Well, I was just going to add what I think is really valuable about this slide that you have up right now isn't necessarily the specific outcome that you have identified. Because some people looking at this slide might might disagree with what the definition of digital literacy is, or what improvement looks like, etc. What's key here isn't your definition of digital literacy or your definition of improvement. It's that you've made a definition, period. You've explicitly identified what digital literacy means to you, how you're going to measure it, what improvement you're looking for, and you've been as specific as possible about it. And I think that's the real value add here, is the level of detail that you've added to this outcome to make it both measurable, reportable, and understandable to a variety of different people who have a different perspective on what these things mean.
Yeah, and I just want to add that outcomes and measurements are not just for funders. It's not just for us because we ask you to do them. It's really for you to measure your own self and your project and kind of keep yourself accountable. Like if you can say, it's hard to keep yourself accountable to participants will improve their digital literacy skills if you don't really define what that means. Because then you don't really know how your project is actually, if your project is actually reaching that goal. So should you do the project then if if you're not really sure if you're gonna even reach your goal. And
to that I would also say that for many of our watchers or users today or viewers today, we all know that internally we have these definitions. We all have a visceral understanding of what digital literacy means to us and what we like to see happen. it's making it explicit so that others can see it too, and so that you can justify to yourself and others that you've done it, And so I think your point is very valid, Sana. And I'm only delaying to give people a chance to add questions, although the only question we've gotten so far is from Jeremy Dunn. So Jeremy Dunn is asking, will this slide deck be available after this webinar?
And to that we say yes.
Yes, I mean,
yes.
One edit maybe, but yeah, of course, yes.
So this is a good time to actually to mention that there is a website that we have put together. It's at hivechicago.org/RFP FAQ. That's RFP FAQ. The FAQ for the RFP that's on the Hive Chicago website will feature this webinar and the slide deck available to you when we're done. So check that out now or later to get that information. We'll post the slide deck immediately after this webinar is over.
Great, thank you so much, Robert.
So sometimes outcomes may be related to Hive's specific goals, and as most Hive members know by now, there are these 4 key goals of the Hive network. And I think it's important to note that while some of your outcomes will be related to and framed by the experiences of your participants, some outcomes will be related to each of these particular Hive goals. And so don't forget to be asking yourselves the questions about how are we going to, what will our outcome be around equitable access? What activities are we going to engage in order to ensure that we have equitable access, and how are we going to know it? So what will the measure be for that? So that's one example. How are we going to build learning pathways, and how are we going to know that at the end of the project? So keep in mind that these 4 goals are central to your application. Okay.
Okay. Robert, did you want to add anything on that?
No, I think that's great. I mean, to that I might only add that in addition to the Hive goals, the 4 of which Maria and Sana have articulated on that slide, the outcomes could also be related to the different Moonshot Challenge areas that we've identified. So is there a transportation related, parent engagement related, youth voice related outcome to your project that can be explicitly tied to some of those challenge areas we're working hard to address?
Right.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we're almost at the end. The last deck is going to be just your resources. Where did we find some of this information, and how can you kind of read more about it? The first document, I will warn you, is about like 90 pages. So if you don't just hit print right away, but it's really strong in that it talks about measures and outcomes, and I think it's written by funders. I'm not exactly sure, but and the second one is written by a grant writer, and it's talking about kind of ways that you can write your own SMART goals, and a lot of what's in these slides is gleaned from that. So yeah, I'll now turn it back to you, Robert, and I'm going to stop screen sharing, and hopefully if we have any questions, we can address those now. Thanks so much.
No, thank you, Sana and Maria, for your insight on the application process. I'm really excited that this is a resource that will be available to our members after the webinar is through. So if you joined late or you want to share with anybody else in your organization or in the network to help them complete the application process, please share this webinar. You can find it after this is done on our G+ page, and then also on the RFP FAQ page, which is available at hivechicago.org/RFP-FAQ. So we'll make sure that the webinar and slides are available there. Right now, we wanted to open it up for just open Q&A. We're joined by a few folks in the Hangout right now, and if you wanted to just verbalize any questions or concerns you had and just talk it out with us, we're available for the next half hour. You should be muted. I'm talking to a couple of folks who are on the Hangout right now, and if you just unmute yourself when you're ready, you can ask away and talk to us. So we'll give you a second to figure out how to unmute. The muting options are sort of at the top of your screen. It's a little microphone with a line through it. You could try that out and see if that helps unmute your audio if you're having trouble speaking. If we don't have any questions, and we have none in the Q&A section right now, then the only other thing to add was there was one other question that was about future proposal opportunities. So whether or not there will be additional RFP cycles available in the future. Sana and Maria, have you guys scoped out the next cycles, or do you have any information to provide around that?
So there will be round 1 2016, and we'll be posting that RFP probably in November.
Awesome.
It's amazing how quickly the time goes when you think if you're an organization who may not have it quite together yet to submit an application on May 11th or by May 11th. 2016 seems a long time off, but if you think about it, the proposal deadline for the first 2016 round will be before you know it. So we'll be again issuing the RFP in November.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth noting that there's sort of no moratorium on ideas. So when you've got a proposal, even if it's at a spark or glimmer level, and it's kind of completed, but you have interesting and compelling results from that work, that would be appropriate for another opportunity, but you can't quite get it together in this round. That's something you can still bring back in the future. We've seen projects return after a year even when the timing was better for those organizations.
Absolutely, and sometimes given time and given that time to reflect on the outcomes that one achieved in a smaller glimmer or spark grant, and giving them time to kind of percolate, actually produces a better proposal.
Great.
I just want to add two things. One, Robert, do you remember we talked about how to access the application? We forgot to mention that at the very beginning. But so there's two ways. Robert, do you want to talk about that, or?
I do, and I actually I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off, but I'm going to write this as a question in the Q&A feature. So that it can be available for others and we can timestamp it. And then I'm going to answer it. Well, how about like that tech savviness?
Yeah.
So the RFP application can be accessed in two ways. Probably the easiest and most direct way is to go to hivechicago.org/RFP. And then there's a link to submit an application to Grant Central there. Grant Central is the Chicago Community Trust platform that houses applications and where you submit your applications. If you have not yet created an account on Grant Central, you should go and do that immediately. If you are at a university or other large organization that requires levels of bureaucracy in order to, say, submit proposals, that's something you should move on immediately to make sure that the right people at your organization have authorized and created an account on Grant Central. However, when you enter Grant Central, if you don't do it through the hivechicago.org website, you're going to have to find the application yourself manually. Be aware that the Hive RFP is not under the Hive category. It is under the education category. So if you're searching for the Hive RFP, you need to, from the drop-down menu, select Education, or you can scroll through the variety of different proposal opportunities at the Trust, which may not be a bad idea to find potentially other sources of funding as well.
Yeah. Great. And then my last comment is that thank you all for being with us, and we'll see if we can get some feedback on this webinar, but hopefully it was helpful. And you know, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us or at the fund or Robert at the network, and we look forward to seeing your applications.
Yes.
Oh, okay, excellent. Well then, I guess that's a wrap. I think this round, from what we have seen, is going to be an exciting and competitive one. You know, I wish everybody luck as well, and I wanted to thank Maria Hibbs and Sana Jafri from the Chicago Community Trust once again for being available to help you all with sort of last-minute needs. If you haven't already scheduled an RFP consultation with network staff, that's me. You can find information about doing that at hivechicago.org/RFP. There's still a couple slots available for next week, but for the 25 or so of you I've already talked to, good luck with what you're doing, and I hope this was helpful, and we're excited to see what comes through. Take
Good luck,
care.
everybody.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.